Hi there, second graders. Happy Wednesday. This is going to be your math lesson for Wednesday. This is lesson 15-2 inches. So in yesterday's lesson, we used familiar items like cubes or paper clips to measure length. Today, we will learn how to measure length or how long or tall an object is using a standard unit called an inch. So with yesterday's measurement, we used paper clips or cubes, which are non-standard units, meaning we don't see the words paper clip or cube on a ruler, which is a tool we use to measure. If you look at a ruler that you may have in your house or look up a picture of a ruler, our rulers that we use in class typically have inches on them and centimeters. So we are going to measure using standard units called inches today. And if you think about it, with regards to yesterday's lesson, 1 inch is about the length of a small paper clip. So what we used yesterday to measure the paper clip is about 1 inch long. You can compare a paper clip to a ruler if you have both of those things in your house, or a tape measure. Just make sure you're looking at the inches side, okay? We are going to get started with our video, and then we are going to do the quick check activity together. Because I do not have a ruler on my screen for the other worksheets, we're actually going to do the quick check together. So this is going to be useful to you for your digital quick check. So please make sure to watch this video first before you complete your digital quick check activity on Pearson Realize. All right, let's get started.
You can measure the length and height of an object in inches. Start from the left side of the ruler. An inch is a standard unit of measure. 1 inch is the same length on every inch ruler.
Okay, so when we call something an inch, it is going to be the same length on every inch ruler. It is a standard unit. 1 inch is always 1 inch on every ruler. We always start on the left side before 1 because that is technically 0 inches. And then this space from the first line to the number 1 is 1 inch.
Look at where the eraser ends on the ruler. Between which inch measurements is it?
Okay, so we see that the eraser ends right here. The pink end of the eraser is right here. So between which inch measurements is the end of this eraser? The eraser ends before the second inch measurement, and it falls in between the 1 inch measurement and the 2 inch measurement.
It is between 1 and 2 inches. To measure to the nearest inch, look for the halfway mark. Is the eraser longer or shorter than the halfway mark?
Okay, so to measure to the nearest inch, so to say whether this eraser is closer to 1 inch or 2 inches, look at the halfway mark. The halfway mark on an inch ruler is the line that is about halfway as long as the lines for the inch markings. So see, the 1 inch line goes down this far. The half inch line does not go down as far. It's halfway between 1 inch and 2 inches. So we see this halfway mark here, and I see that the end of the eraser is past the halfway mark. So the question, is the eraser longer or shorter than the halfway mark? If the eraser ends past the halfway mark, then it is longer than the halfway mark.
The eraser is longer than the halfway mark. If the object is longer than the halfway mark, use the greater number. Is the eraser closer to 1 or 2 inches?
Because the eraser is past the halfway mark in between 1 and 2 inches, we can say that the eraser is closer to 2 inches. When we pass the halfway mark, we use the bigger or greater number. 2 is the greater number here. The eraser is past the halfway mark of 1 and 2, so the eraser is closer to 2 inches. Not exactly 2 inches, but closer to 2 inches.
It is closer to 2 inches. 2 is the greater number. The eraser is about 2 inches long.
Notice they use the word about. That's different than exactly. The eraser isn't exactly 2 inches long. It's about 2 inches. It's close to 2 inches long.
You can measure height the same way that you measure length. To measure the height of an object, turn the ruler and start from the bottom side of the ruler.
Okay, so when we measured length, like the length of the eraser, our ruler was horizontal. We wanted to see how long the eraser was. To measure height, turn the ruler vertical. That means up and down. Turn the ruler and start from the bottom side of the ruler. So when you measure length, we started from the left side. When we measure height, we start from the bottom.
Look at where the pine cone ends on the ruler. Between which two measurements is it?
Okay, so the pine cone, we start at the bottom of the ruler to measure it. And right here, its little stem, that's where we're saying the end of the pine cone falls, okay? So we want to know how tall the pine cone is. The end of the pine cone falls between the 1 inch mark and the 2 inch mark. We see that it falls right here. Not quite 1, not quite 2. It falls between 1 inch and 2 inches.
It is between 1 and 2 inches. Is the pine cone longer or shorter than the halfway mark?
Okay, once again, find that halfway mark on the ruler. It's not quite as long as the inch mark lines. It is about halfway as long. So here's our halfway mark. Is the pine cone, the end of the pine cone, longer? So is it past the halfway mark or shorter? Does it fall before the halfway mark? We see that it is shorter than the halfway mark. It is not quite at the halfway mark or beyond. It's shorter.
The pine cone is shorter than the halfway mark. To the nearest inch, about how long is the pine cone?
So because the pine cone, where it ends, is shorter than the halfway mark, we have to say that the pine cone is about 1 inch long. Even though it falls in between 1 and 2 inches, it's not quite at the halfway mark. So to the nearest inch, the pine cone is about 1 inch long or tall.
If the object is shorter than halfway, use the lesser number. It is about 1 inch long. 1 is the lesser number. You have learned how to measure the length and height of an object in inches.
All right, so what we're going to work on is the quick check, which is going to be the same thing as the digital quick check that you have on your 15-2 dashboard, your lesson for today, your activity for today that you will submit to me. So these are going to be the same answers. All right, here we have inch rulers, and we're measuring different objects, okay? And we're measuring their length. We can say that we're measuring their length because notice that our rulers are horizontal, left to right. We're not standing the ruler up. If we were standing the ruler up with 0 on the bottom, that would be measuring height. Because our ruler is side to side and we start on the left, we're measuring length. All right, so number 1, we are measuring a pencil. Notice that the pencil's eraser starts all the way to the left on the ruler at 0 inches. We can see that the tip of the pencil falls about here, not exactly at 6 inches. Thinking back to the video, when we decide about how long an object is, if we're measuring it using an inch ruler, we need to look at the halfway mark, particularly if an object does not fall exactly on an inch marking. I can see that the tip of the pencil, the lead of the pencil, is a little bit past the 6-inch mark. That means it falls between the 6-inch and the 7-inch marks on our ruler. Now find the halfway point in between 6 and 7. It's that halfway line in between the 6-inch mark and the 7-inch mark. The halfway point is very important because it helps us determine to what the nearest inch is that for the object that we're measuring, okay? So if the object falls before the halfway mark, we use the lesser number. If the length of the object falls after the halfway mark, we use the greater number. So our pencil lead falls right here before the halfway mark. So I will say that the pencil is about 6 inches long, B. It is closer to 6 inches than it is to 7 inches, and I can see that by looking at the halfway mark. All right, number 2, we have, looks like a ribbon, all right? We see that the end of the ribbon starts at 0 inches, and the other end of the ribbon falls before 8 inches. So once again, we're looking at an inch ruler. My ribbon starts at the left side of the ruler and it stops before the 8-inch mark. I can see it's not quite at 8 inches. So I need to use my halfway point between 7 inches and 8 inches to determine about how long this ribbon is. I can see that the ribbon, even though it falls between 7 inches and 8 inches, I can see that it is past the halfway point. There's that halfway mark between 7 and 8. Because my ribbon is past the halfway mark, I use the greater number. That means this ribbon is about 8 inches long. Not quite, but about. So B is our correct answer. And last object to measure, this pair of scissors. We are measuring the length of the scissors. We see that one end of the scissors starts on the left side of the ruler at 0 inches. And we also see that the blade end of the scissors ends just past the 5-inch mark. If you drag your mouse or your finger down to look where that would be placed on the ruler, you see that it passes the 5-inch mark. So we can say that these scissors, this pair of scissors, the length falls between 5 inches and 6 inches. So it's not quite 5 inches long, not quite 6 inches long. It's in between those two markings. So once again, I need to use my halfway point between 5 and 6 and determine if the scissors fall before the halfway point, I use the smaller number. If the scissors length falls after the halfway point, I use the greater number, the bigger number. So look here at the blade of the scissors. We see that the length falls before the halfway mark. So even though the scissors length is between 5 inches and 6 inches, because it is not quite at the halfway point, we use the smaller number, which is 5 inches. We can say that this pair of scissors is about 5 inches long. All right, and last question, number 4, writing and math. Tell how you use inches to measure length. So we're kind of going to answer this in a step-by-step way. How will we use inches to measure length? Well, remember when we're measuring length, we measure side to side. So the first thing we have to do when we have our ruler is put our object next to the 0 line on the ruler. So make sure we line up our object just like the end of the scissors here is lined up with the 0 line on the ruler. All right, so that's our first sentence. I put the object next to the 0 line on the ruler. Let me drag my text out here. That is our first step, lining up the object with the 0-inch line on the ruler. All right, what is our next step? What do we need to look at after we have put the object next to the 0 line? Well, we need to look at the end of the object and the inches that it falls near on the ruler. So step number 2 would be to look at the end of the object, so the object that you're measuring, and the inches on the ruler. And last step, after you have lined up your object with the 0 line and you've looked at the end of the object and the inches on the ruler, the third step is to write down the number of inches that's closer to the end of the object. So, step by step, step 1, put the object next to the 0 line. Look at the scissors here, lined up with 0 on the ruler. Step 2, look at the end of the object and the inches that are on the ruler as well. Third step, write down the number of inches that is closer to the end of the object. So use that halfway point as your guide. I can see here that the end of this pair of scissors is closer to the 5-inch mark. So I write down that the scissors are about 5 inches long. Those are our steps for using inches, and this explanation is complete and correct. All right, guys, I hope that makes sense. Hopefully you have a ruler that you can practice at home, measuring the length of different items and the height of different items. All right, happy learning, guys. Bye.